For decades, the global financial system ran on a set of rules we all just kind of took for granted. But what happens when those very foundations start to crack? Today, we're going to dive into a system that's being pushed to its absolute limits, challenged from every single side.
And that's the big question, right? It's what's keeping markets and governments up at night. The very pillars that have held up our economic world for generations, yeah, they're starting to wobble. So are we just hitting a rough patch, or is something much bigger, something fundamental about to break?
Okay, so here's our game plan. First up, we'll get a handle on why the system is so stressed out. Then, we're going to look at three big pressures that are really chipping away at it. You've got the fight between politicians and central banks, the bizarre new rules of the market, and this cloud of pessimism that's hanging over everything. And finally, we'll ask the big one: what happens if it all starts to crumble?
All right, let's kick things off with the big picture. See, for the longest time, there was this unwritten rule book, a global playbook on how you run a modern economy. Everyone was pretty much on the same page. Well, it looks like someone's tearing that playbook up.
Think of it like this. The global economy was built like a really solid building, sitting on a few massive pillars. One pillar was independent central banks. The grown-ups in the room, keeping the currency stable without politicians messing with things. Another was capital flowing freely to wherever it could do the most good. And the third was this belief that markets, most of the time, are rational. These were the bedrock ideas that gave us decades of stability.
So where's the first crack appearing? Well, it's a full-on assault from the outside. We're talking about the age-old battle between short-term political wins and long-term economic health. And ground zero for this fight? It's the central bank. Now, this idea of an independent central bank wasn't just some academic theory. Nope, it was forged in the fire of some really bad history. I mean, just think about Germany's hyperinflation in the 1920s. That was a direct result of politicians just printing money to solve their problems, and it led to total economic collapse. This independence was meant to be a firewall to stop that from ever happening again.
And this just lays out the shift perfectly. The old idea, right, was a room full of experts, technocrats, just looking at the data, making the hard choices to keep the economy stable for the long haul. But the new reality? It's politicians openly shouting at those same people, demanding they cut interest rates to get a quick economic sugar rush, usually right before an election. That super important long-term pillar, it's not just creaking, it's officially under threat.
And believe me, this isn't just talk. Just look at what's happening in the United States. The Department of Justice sending a subpoena to the head of the Federal Reserve, that's something that's just never happened before. It's a huge signal that the government is willing to use its power to lean on an institution that's supposed to be completely independent.
But let's be super clear. This is not just an American problem. It's happening everywhere. In Japan, you've got immense pressure to keep rates low, even with inflation creeping up. In Britain, politicians are literally talking about turning the Bank of England into a government cash machine. And then you look at places like Turkey and other emerging markets, and you see governments just raiding the central bank's savings. That firewall we talked about, it's being breached all over the world.
Okay, so you've got this political attack coming from the outside. But at the same time, something just as disruptive is bubbling up from within the system itself. The actual machinery of the stock market is being rewired by a quiet but powerful force that's changing all the rules.
And that force is passive investing. I mean, look at this. It's the new giant in the room. We're talking about almost half of all the money in the American stock market. Now, these funds, they don't have some genius stock picker calling the shots. Nope, they just automatically buy everything in a big index, like the S&P 500. And that one simple automatic action is having some really big and, frankly, weird effects.
So how does this work? Well, it creates this really bizarre feedback loop. Let's break it down. Step 1, money flows in. Let's say you put your money into one of these big index funds. Step 2, automatic buying. That fund has to go out and buy shares of the big companies in the index, your Apples, your Microsofts. Step 3, prices go up. All this automatic, relentless buying just pushes the stock prices of those big companies higher and higher. And here's the kicker, step 4, value gets ignored. The buying happens no matter how well the company is actually doing. It's a cycle that just feeds on itself.
And people have been ringing the alarm bells about this for years. This quote from Bernstein back in 2016 really nails the fear. The silent road to serfdom. Wow. See, the whole point of a stock market is supposed to be finding the best, most innovative companies and giving them money to grow. The big worry here is that we're creating a market that doesn't do that anymore. Instead, it's just becoming a dumb machine that funnels more money to whoever's already the biggest.
So we've got the political attack from the outside and this weird market rewiring from the inside. But there's a third pressure point, and this one, it's harder to see, but it might be the most powerful of all. It's psychology. It's this deep, stubborn feeling of economic pessimism.
Yeah, it turns out the vibes are actually a real thing in economics. When everyone feels pessimistic about the future, they start acting in ways that, well, that make that gloomy future come true. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's not just a bad mood, it's a real economic force that acts like a brake on everything. And just look at the scale of this. It's pretty staggering. A huge international poll found that for every single optimist out there, there are 2 pessimists. Think about that, 2 to 1. That is an incredible weight of negativity pressing down on the global economy.
So what does all that gloom actually do? Well, it's simple, really. If you're feeling worried, you put off buying that new car. If a company is nervous, it holds off on building a new factory or hiring new people. Investors play it safe. And here's the really dangerous part. When people are scared, they demand easy answers from politicians. Things like protectionism, which can actually make everything a whole lot worse.
Which brings us to the big, critical question. You've got all these things hitting at once: political meddling, warped markets, and this crisis of confidence. So what happens when the foundations finally give way?
This quote from The Economist absolutely nails it. At the end of the day, the entire economic system, everything from the value of your money to the price of a stock, it all runs on one thing: credibility, trust, a shared belief that the rules matter. And the scary thing is, that trust is incredibly fragile. It's way, way easier to lose than it is to get back.
And if you look at history, the lesson is pretty stark. When that trust in the system disappears, when the basic rules of the game get thrown out, there's no easy fix. The path back is always long, it's always messy, and it's usually painful. You can't just flip a switch and make everything okay again.
So that's where things stand. You've got the established economic order getting hit by a perfect storm. Pressure from the outside, pressure from the inside, and pressure from our own psychology. It's being tested in ways most of us have never seen in our lifetimes. And the ultimate question is, will the system bend, or is it finally going to break?